Have you ever noticed how swiftly the mind leaps from one extreme to another? Why does one thought feel entirely certain, while the next dissolves into doubt? Why does a fleeting success inflate pride, only for a minor setback to collapse the heart into shame? What unseen currents drive desire, fear, attachment, and aversion to dominate awareness, shaping perception, emotion, and every subtle response? The mind is restless. Desire tugs, anger ignites, fear tightens, hope rises, and disappointment falls. Pride inflates, shame contracts, all arising without pause or clear seeing. This continual movement is not a defect of character. It is the habitual condition of the mind. In the Buddhist teaching, this pattern is clearly articulated. The human mind, often without awareness, is described as moving in cycles of craving and rejection, attachment and resistance. When these extremes govern perception, judgment becomes clouded, and suffering arises at the very foundation of thought and emotion. Madhyamāpratipad, the middle way, is not a set of rules for the outside world. It is a principle for the mind, a method of perceiving, feeling, and responding that avoids extremes while cultivating clarity, balance, and insight. It is the path that frees the mind from dualistic thinking, the tendency to label everything as black or white, good or bad, success or failure. Through the middle way, thoughts and emotions are known as they arise and observed with lucidity. Desire is known without clinging or domination. Anger is known as anger, without feeding it and without turning away. Fear is met without escape or avoidance. Pride is discerned without grasping or inflation. Shame is held with understanding rather than collapse. When the mind knows these states clearly, they no longer command action. Awareness itself becomes the ground of freedom. And from this ground, right understanding naturally guides speech and conduct. In this clarity, ethical discernment flows without force, and compassion appears as a living reflection of insight, not as an obligation, an ideal, or an effort to be kind, but as the quiet absence of confusion. Buddha's teaching is timeless. The patterns of the mind, the extremes of desire, aversion, pride, and fear transcend era, culture, and circumstance. Madhyamāpratipad is a compass for navigating the inner landscape, offering stability, perceptive clarity, and ethical grounding amid the ceaseless oscillations of thought and emotion. It is a way to engage fully with life, yet remain unensnared by extremes. The trap of extremes: how dualistic thinking distorts perception. The mind is cunning in its habits. It seeks simplicity in complexity, certainty in uncertainty, comfort in discomfort. In this search, it inclines toward extremes, right and wrong, success and failure, praise and blame, friend and enemy. These divisions feel natural, almost inevitable, as though they belong to reality itself. Yet they are the echo of patterns repeated without awareness. Dualistic thinking is subtle. On the surface, it may feel harmless. It allows you to make decisions quickly, categorize experiences efficiently, and respond with apparent certainty. But beneath this convenience lies distortion. One fleeting failure can magnify into catastrophe. One transient success hardens into a sense of superiority. Emotions swing violently, often without conscious recognition. Pride inflates from a compliment, only to collapse into shame at the slightest criticism. Desire tugs insistently, aversion contracts, and anger can flare suddenly, consuming attention. Fear tightens, hope rises, and disappointment falls. The mind moves relentlessly between poles, rarely resting in balance. These patterns are invisible, yet persistent. In dividing reality into absolutes, the mind obscures nuance, impermanence, interdependence, and the emptiness, sunyata, of all phenomena. Nothing exists inherently. Extremes arise dependently, yet we experience them as fixed and real. Judgment becomes rigid, perception narrows, and what is fluid is treated as fixed. This distortion does not only warp your inner world, it ripples outward. Decisions made in the grip of pride, fear, or anger shape relationships, cloud judgment, and can lead to harm. Subtle misunderstandings, unnecessary conflicts, or impulsive actions. The suffering that follows is rarely from life itself, but from the habitual leap between extremes, mistaken for reality, rather than recognized as transient and empty. Buddha taught that awareness of this habit is the first step in seeing the trap. Without noticing the mind's swings, attachment and aversion dominate thought, emotion, and action. Desire can become obsession, fear can constrict, anger can erupt, pride can blind, and shame can collapse perception. Every movement of mind is amplified by this habitual distortion, silently shaping both your inner landscape and the world around you. Even the smallest mental currents, the flicker of irritation, a surge of longing, the pang of pride, the whisper of fear, contribute to this pattern. Unnoticed, they grow into waves that determine choices, responses, and relationships. The mind caught in dualistic thinking is rarely neutral, rarely free. It reacts compulsively, misreads situations, and magnifies both internal suffering and external consequences. This is the trap. Subtle, persistent, and deceptively familiar. Extremes dominate perception without invitation. The mind swings, the heart tightens or inflates, and actions follow habit rather than discernment. You may not even notice the pattern, yet it shapes your experience and the lives of those around you, silently dictating thought, feeling, and conduct. Madhyamāpratipad, the path between extremes in the mind. Madhyamāpratipad, the middle way, is the path Buddha taught, not as a set of external rules, but as a principle for perceiving, thinking, and feeling. It is a method for engaging the mind with balance, seeing clearly without distortion, and responding with ethical clarity. The middle way does not require denial of desire or suppression of emotion. Rather, it shows how extremes of craving and aversion, pride and shame, hope and fear, distort understanding and amplify suffering, and how awareness can free the mind from these patterns. Human thought is naturally drawn to extremes. A fleeting success inflates pride. A minor setback magnifies into despair. Desire tugs the heart toward imagined permanence. Fear constricts it toward imagined catastrophe. Pride sharpens judgment. Shame contracts it. These oscillations shape perception, cloud insight, and entangle the mind in cycles of reaction. Buddha's teaching observes this not to condemn the mind, but to illuminate it. Awareness is the first step. Noticing the rise and fall of extremes without being swept away. The middle way also points to emptiness, sunyata. Every extreme, every emotion, arises dependent on countless conditions, lacking any inherent or permanent self-nature, anatta. Pride swells when circumstances favor recognition. Shame collapses when criticism appears. Desire tugs the heart when fulfillment seems near. Fear tightens its grip at the prospect of loss. Anger sparks when expectations clash with reality. Sadness drifts in when hopes dissolve. By perceiving thoughts, emotions, and phenomena as empty of independent existence, the mind loosens its habitual grasp, releasing attachment and aversion. Reality is experienced as fluid, interconnected, and contingent, freeing perception from the tyranny of extremes. This insight is not mere intellectual abstraction. It is a practical, living understanding that underlies every moment on the middle way, revealing that extremes themselves, whether pride, shame, desire, fear, anger, or sadness, hold no ultimate solidity. They arise, persist, and pass away, contingent upon causes, conditions, and perception. In practical terms, the middle way unfolds in the subtle spaces of consciousness. When desire arises, the mind can observe its pull without surrendering. When fear surfaces, the mind can acknowledge its presence without fleeing. Pride and shame appear, yet they do not define the self. Each mental movement becomes an opportunity for conscious recognition, ethical discernment, and balanced response. This practice is intimate and immediate. It exists in the heartbeat before action, in the pause before judgment, in the thought before reaction. By cultivating awareness in these moments, the mind loosens its habitual grip on extremes. Desire does not become obsession. Fear does not become paralysis. Pride does not become arrogance. Shame does not become collapse. Instead, the mind perceives reality as it is, acts with precision, and allows the heart to move fluidly with insight. Ethics are inseparable from this practice. Clarity of mind naturally informs speech, thought, and action. When the mind is not inflamed by attachment, nor constricted by aversion, choices flow from understanding rather than impulse. Compassion is not imposed as a duty. It arises naturally from perceiving others clearly and acting without harm. Insight and ethics move together, inseparably, as reflections of a mind aligned with reality. Consider the mind gripped by longing. Habit magnifies it into a tether that binds perception. Fear can spiral into imagined catastrophe. The middle way offers a space between these swings, a conscious awareness that observes without clinging, discerns without rejection, and acts without perpetuating harm. Each moment, no matter how small, becomes an opportunity for awakening, a practice in freedom, balance, and clarity. The timelessness of Madhyamāpratipad lies in its universality. Desire, aversion, pride, fear, these forces exist in every human mind across all eras and cultures. Their forms may shift, but their essence endures. By cultivating the middle way internally, the mind becomes a field of insight, ethical discernment, and compassionate presence. Every thought is a chance for balance, every emotion, a doorway to understanding, every choice, a reflection of awakened awareness. Buddha's teaching shows that liberation begins in this subtle mastery of the mind. The external world remains unpredictable, turbulent, and complex. But the inner mind, trained in the middle way, perceives with clarity, feels with steadiness, and responds with wisdom. Madhyamāpratipad is not a distant ideal. It is alive in every thought, every emotion, every moment of consciousness. Awareness, ethical clarity, and compassion are inseparable companions on the path. To walk the middle way is to live fully within the mind, awake to its tendencies, guided by insight, and grounded in ethical awareness. Desire, fear, pride, and shame continue to arise, but they no longer dominate. Extremes are seen clearly, impermanence is recognized, and every action is informed by discernment. This is the transformative power of Madhyamāpratipad: freedom, clarity, and balance arising from the profound act of observing the mind as it truly is. The mind in practice, applying the middle way in daily life. Understanding the middle way is one thing, living it is another. Life constantly presents situations that stir emotions. Without conscious awareness, these currents seize attention and dictate reaction. Madhyamāpratipad teaches that every moment, no matter how ordinary, contains an opportunity to practice seeing clearly and responding with balance. In daily interactions, the practice begins with noticing. When a compliment lifts pride, observe it without inflating the self-image. When criticism stings, feel the discomfort without collapsing into shame. When desire pulls toward possession or recognition, acknowledge the longing without clinging. When fear arises, meet it without avoidance, seeing its impermanent nature. When anger flares, allow it to exist without feeding it or acting impulsively. These moments are the laboratory of the mind, where clarity, patience, and discernment are cultivated. Applying the middle way is not about suppressing emotion or denying experience. It is about creating a pause, a space between stimulus and response. In this pause, awareness allows observation instead of reaction. Decisions are made with lucidity. Speech flows from understanding rather than habit, and actions are guided by ethical clarity. Even the smallest gestures, listening without judgment, speaking without harshness, acting without compulsion, become a practice of freedom. This awareness also transforms relationships. When you recognize your own patterns of attachment, aversion, or pride, you are less likely to project them onto others. Misunderstandings are met with curiosity rather than hostility. Conflict is approached with discernment rather than reaction. Compassion arises naturally, not as a rule to follow, but as a reflection of a mind grounded in insight. Over time, these small practices accumulate into a stable presence. Desire no longer hijacks attention. Fear no longer dictates avoidance. Pride no longer blinds judgment, and shame no longer contracts perception. The mind becomes steady, the heart flexible, and the actions of daily life infused with clarity, balance, and ethical sensitivity. In this way, Madhyamāpratipad is not a distant ideal. It is lived moment by moment in the ordinary rhythms of life. Ultimately, walking the middle way is a continuous, intimate engagement with the mind. Each thought, feeling, and impulse is an opportunity to refine awareness, align perception with reality, and act with insight. By integrating these practices into daily life, the wisdom of Buddha becomes tangible, and liberation is no longer abstract. It is experienced in every decision, interaction, and movement of consciousness. From awareness to liberation, the transformative power of practice. Walking the middle way is not a distant ideal or abstract philosophy. It is a living, moment-to-moment practice. Each thought, emotion, and impulse offers an opportunity to observe without grasping or rejecting. Desire can be acknowledged without clinging. Anger can be recognized without feeding it or turning away. Fear can be met without fleeing. Pride can be discerned without inflation, and shame can be held with understanding rather than collapse. In these acts of attentive observation, the mind discovers freedom, not as a goal imposed from outside, but as the natural outcome of clear seeing. The transformative power of this practice is subtle yet profound. When the mind learns to notice its habitual oscillations, compulsive reactions lose their grip. Emotional turbulence softens, and choices emerge from clarity rather than habit. You begin to see how fleeting irritations, small longings, or sudden fears shape your perception, responses, and relationships. By meeting these mental currents with awareness, you prevent them from dictating action or clouding judgment. Each moment becomes a laboratory for understanding the self and the world with precision and ethical discernment. Ethical clarity is inseparable from this awareness. When the mind is free from extremes, speech, action, and thought flow naturally in accordance with insight. Compassion is no longer an effortful ideal, but an effortless reflection of understanding. Seeing clearly what arises in yourself allows you to perceive others with similar lucidity. The turbulence that once governed reactions, pride swelling, shame contracting, fear tightening, desire tugging, now moves without commanding you. Balance becomes the default, and wisdom guides action. The practice also reshapes ordinary life. The pause before responding to irritation, the breath taken before reacting to fear, the acknowledgement of pride or longing without judgment. These simple, often overlooked moments become opportunities for liberation. By cultivating mindfulness in daily interactions, the mind gradually learns to act from discernment rather than compulsion. You are no longer swept by extremes. Instead, you respond proportionally, ethically, and with presence. Ultimately, Madhyamāpratipad transforms consciousness itself. The inner landscape, once a field of restless oscillations, becomes a space of steadiness, clarity, and balance. Desire, anger, fear, pride, and shame continue to arise, as they naturally do in human experience, but they no longer dominate. Awareness grounds perception, understanding informs action, and compassion flows effortlessly. The mind that was once captive to extremes becomes awake, ethical, and free. Liberation, therefore, is not separate from life. It is life observed fully, honestly, and wisely. The middle way does not remove challenges or emotions. It teaches how to meet them with clarity, presence, and ethical insight. In every thought, every feeling, every choice, the practice of awareness becomes the pathway to freedom. Through Madhyamāpratipad, the mind learns not only to endure life's fluctuations, but to inhabit them with wisdom, steadiness, and compassion. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living.